fuel in jerrycans and filling the cars has also caused the petrol station to be empty. So people need to be assured that there will be petrol the next day so that panic can go down. More so, you know, the president's big four agendas need to be very clear at this onset, because election year brings a lot of uncertainty with investors. We want to make sure that the investors still remains in the country or have confidence in the government which is to come. And you know very well also these ideas of violence and crashes within our people. People are relocating from their original homes. I think people should be assured that they are also safe in their original places where they've been living, regardless of the elections.
Security. So I was just taking down your list in terms of priority. If you were seated in a Kuriatani seat, what you'd be looking at, you'd be reducing taxes on school equipment, including books. Yes. You'd also be focusing on the cost of basic commodities, especially food, and you've mentioned unga. Then also the uncertainty around, you know, fuel and petroleum products, and now also uncertainty around investors, being that this is a transitional year in as far as elective politics is concerned. Now, the issue of, you know, reducing the cost of fuel. Last week, there was a standoff between government and OMCs, the oil marketers there, and we saw some money, 34 billion actually disbursed that had been made from the subsidies. Going forward, what recommendations would you give to ensure that, first of all, we cushion mwananchi from high fuel prices, given that this is a global commodity? We do not have our own source, so global shocks, and also ensure that these people who are in the value chain, who are complementing government efforts to ensure that we have these products in the country, also at the end of the day can take something back home. How would you, the recommendations that you'd make to strike that balance?
Regina, it's obvious that these subsidies that are given, that 4 billion are given by the president, could have come much earlier. It didn't need that or to wait till the crisis sets in and then we start looking for the solutions. We don't need to wait for the crisis to set in our country and then we start looking for remedies. This is one of the things that we have to hold our leaders in the office into account, that they have to be responsible on their dockets. So that's one. Secondly, I would say that fuel, being the most important commodity, we should be having the reserve. We should have a reserve that when such a period comes, the reserve should be released to the marketers so that they can reduce their prices. And also, some of the marketers also play it hard just to so that they can increase the prices. You know, this has caused a lot of anxiety among the consumers. I hope there won't be increase of oil products, increase of prices of oil products, because that will really kill our people most. And especially, you know, like the border industry now, most of them should be, this week they should be going hungry because they have been queuing at the petrol stations with the big jerrycans. And you know, those are the subsistence consumers for this commodity, and they depend on their daily operations in order for them to put food on the table. You can also even imagine people in the matatu industry. Now, the schools are going to open. We depend on these matatus and these borders. Then it means the fares are going to increase.
Yes.
That would be a problem. So I hope there won't be an increase of taxes in this oil, commodities.
I like what you have said. The ripple effect of the cost of fuel might actually affect everything else. And one of the issues that has also been raised by some analysts is that the government needs to come with a lasting solution when it comes to these subsidies so that we do not have disruptions of the supply chain because of the ripple effect. So, well, if they did it deliberately so that they would have their monies out, well, I would say it's all fair in business. What can I say? But we are welcoming you to chip in into this conversation where we're talking about, budgetary expectations, or rather, what are your budget expectations, given that we expect this particular budget to be presented by Ukur Yetani this afternoon at 3 p.m. from Parliament Buildings. Our Twitter handle is at KBC Channel 1. For now, we take a quick breather. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Changes, technologies grow, and so you need to be in the know. We bring you tech news from all over the world.
Me, I understand science revolves around life.
Tech policies and programs. Take on Tech has your back. Coming to your screens every Saturday at 4:30 p.m. only on KBC Channel 1. Join me, Stephanie Ayeta and Grace Givaga as we serve you with only the best tech updates the world over.
He killed his wife, Pinky.
Don't act like you're surprised. You gave birth to him, Mom. In order to get married to me, he killed his wife with his own hands. And now, to get another woman? Who knows what he's capable of?
Step aside!
Why are you beating him? Who gave you the right to do that? Didn't I tell you? I truly love him. You kept saying that since you've decided to get a divorce with her, you'd cut all ties with her.
Divorce?
What did you say? You may just do some asking around.
Kusema la kweli mimi sina la kusema. Na furahi tu sana sana sana.
Kwa nitakuwa tunahama kila wakati.
Haya yote yameletwa kwa sababu yako wewe mwenyewe na kufutana na Kate.
Kate, bado kesi inaendelea.
Huyo mtu aliyoko hapo ndio chanzo cha mimi kuwa na wazo hilo la kuiuza.
Hebu jiangalie jinsi ulivyo. Huoni hata aibu?
Good morning. We're still having the conversation around your budget expectations. Remember, this has been dubbed as President Uhuru Kenyatta's last budget, and government intends to spend a cool 3.3 trillion shillings for the financial year 2022-2023. That particular financial year will be commencing in July. Some of the anomalies, or rather deviations from the norm, is that we're having our presentation of the budget being made 2 months earlier, given that this indeed is a transition year where we're going to be having a change of guard with, the leadership, given that we're getting into the elections, so to speak. And taking us through this conversation is none other than Anthony Nyambane Ogato, who is an aspiring member of parliament of Kitutu Masaba constituency in Nyamira County. Karibu sir. So we've already highlighted what areas you would prioritize, and we've talked about you zeroing in on the issue of fuel. Now there's a situation that in this particular budget, the 3.3 trillion shillings budget, KRA is tasked with collecting a cool 2.1 trillion shillings. Do you think this will be feasible from where you sit? What's your opinion on that matter?
I think at this time, being the election year and because of the COVID-19, which ravaged our people so bad, KRA should not be very aggressive in correcting this revenue and should give some kind of tax breaks to the people, to the citizens, so that people can at least heal from the disaster that they were for the last 2 years. And being that this time is the election year, and at the same time, the students, children are going back to school, especially secondary schools, parents are really hit hard. And of course, the economy, everybody has felt the pinch. So KRA shouldn't be very much aggressive in looking for these for this what they want to correct from the people. If they do, they're gonna hurt the people, and the expenditure will be low, or the demand will be low. People do not have the purchasing power. So I think KRA should at least treat people with some courtesy, so that at least people can heal from this. I know even you
I'm really eagerly waiting to see what they're going to do in as far as, ensuring that there's more money in my pocket.
Sure.
So because the high cost of living is getting out of hand. But now let's rope in Irene Kamau, who is a director, Action Now Kenya, on Zoom. Irene, if you can hear me. Good morning, Irene. How are you?
Fine, thank you, Regina. How are you?
Great. Would want to know, what are your expectations ahead of the budget presentation this afternoon by Ukur Yatani, the CS, the National Treasury?
I'm holding my breath, to say the truth. My expectations is that, and I would like to specifically speak about the issues regarding children in this country. We are at a situation in the country, Regina, where the inflation has hit so hard. You're realizing that families are now getting to a point where getting just the basic needs is a challenge. And as a result of that, what is happening is that children are ending up getting neglected. Parents are not having time to be with their children because they have to be out there trying to get some income to feed their families. The income is not enough. So you're also realizing that at the end of the day, even the feeding is getting to be a challenge. The minute the feeding gets to be a challenge, a lot of our children are going to end up, or actually ending up getting malnourished. So for the younger children, you realize that they end up getting stunted. It affects their brains. It affects the development of their brains. So for me, what I'm expecting from the budget today, number one, we need to see a situation where the basic needs, the rates for the basic needs actually are reduced. We need to get a situation where at least the food prices get to go down. We need to get our fuel issues sorted out, like very, very quickly, because that already is affecting other issues to do with our feeding habits at the family level. So that is one of the things I would be expecting. Number two, I'm hoping and I'm expecting that the government would need to look at the different areas of wastage that we have as a country. Because you realize over the last few years, our tax levels have actually gone very high. But yet, even as we collect the taxes, we end up having so many loopholes where we lose out on the resources. So as a country, it becomes difficult for us. So that is what I'm expecting, Regina. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like what you have spoken about, tightening the loose ends when it comes to collection of revenue by the taxman. Given its history, KRA has been missing its targets of raising this required revenue to drive government development and also take care of government business. Now it has a target of 2.1 trillion shillings, which is 300 billion shillings more than its target last year. Now, Irene, there's been a conversation about widening the tax bracket. I know it's out of your depth, but also to increase or rather have, the informal sector now also jump in and participate, actively in matters of tax. What do you think is hampering government from bringing in or rather roping in the informal sector in as far as matters tax are concerned?
Like you say, that is very deep for me, but I can tell you, I work in the community. And I can tell you one of the challenges that the community has with our government is the whole issue of, having money going into waste, and we get to see it going into waste. So since the informal sector is actually very informal, it's not very well structured, the first thing that the community or people down here, the first thing that they're going to do is basically stay away from anything KRA, stay away from anything taxes, to tighten that gap. I think one of the things we need to do is, let me talk about a case of give and take. What is the government giving to the informal sector so that then the informal sector, on the other hand, is willing to say, okay, look, because you have allowed me to do my business, then it is okay, I'm going to pay the taxes. Because you realize for small business people, what happens is that you're already so heavily taxed for the licenses, the business fees, the advertising, the everything, that at your small level, the mama mboga, whoever is doing a small kiosk, they are not making any money in their shop. So if the government can enable the small business person actually raise income, by basically putting structures in place that will make it easy to run the business, then I believe the informal sector can be roped in. And the structures or the ways to do that could easily be through at the business licensing level, if that can actually be done. But then in return, whatever the licenses are collected, they need to support the small person doing business down here.
Mm-hmm. Very well said, Irene. They're supporting MSMEs there to, catapult economic growth. Then we will have compliance, because as MSMEs will feel that they're part and parcel of the community, and that government is also taking care of them. Before I let you go, Irene, I understand you have another meeting with the children. DVBS coming back on board after a 2-year stint missing in action. I'm sure the girls and boys are really waiting to participate in this. My daughter actually really enjoys the DVBS. Now, before we let you go on that matter, the issue of graft, the issue of corruption when it comes to matters of governance and leadership. At a time when we're talking about government raising these funds and then taking care of us, matters of health, infrastructure, and such, the cost of graft when it comes to impacting on what or rather our lives as Kenyans. What can you say about that issue?
Regina, for me, matters graft, they touch a very soft spot in my heart, because when you look at the kind of wastage we have, honestly, we cannot afford it. We can't afford it at all. And then what normally happens is that, unfortunately, as Kenyans, somebody once said that we people who live in Kenya, we live in Kenya as if we don't belong here. It's like we are going somewhere else. So we are kind of just here very briefly and, going out to another country. So one of the things that happens is that as Kenyans, we lack ownership. Hence the reason that it's easy for me to steal from my employer. It's easy for my employer to steal from their boss. It's easy for my boss to steal from the country. It's easy for the leaders to steal from the government. And it's basically becomes a big cycle that unfortunately is being replicated even with our children, for example. So for me, the first thing that Kenyans we have to do, we have to own this country. We belong here. God placed us here. So we have to own this country. We have to make decisions that are good for our country, which means, on the one hand, I will choose to actually protect what belongs to my country and what belongs to my county. Now, the other thing, for example, I'll talk about the leaders. We realize I've heard about this case. They call it now devolved corruption, where corruption has gone down to the county level. Yet at the point when we were doing the constitution, we were looking at having resources reaching the person right at the ground. So I believe one of the things that government needs to do is that to ensure that every county is accountable for the resources that they are collecting and the resources they are receiving. And then after that is done, the other thing is that we need to have some level of accountability. In fact, let me call them firm accountability demand or requirements, such that for the county to receive their quota funding from the national government, they need to properly account for the money that has already been put into their kitty for that particular financial year. The wider government, on the other hand, it also needs to ensure that there is proper accountability. Endo needs to wake up and let's get people being accountable. Yeah.
My take home from what you have said, Irene, is that we need to own this country. We need to loosen the loose ends, and ensure that whatever it is that we're generating trickles down to the very last mama mboga, so that at the end of the day, we pull together. And if the economy does well, it does it for everyone else. Accountability. I will use your term with a tinge of salt, devolved corruption. And I'd want to let you go off and join now, bring back Anthony Nyambane Ogato, who is an aspiring member of parliament, to now talk about the... Thank you very much for your time, Irene. All the best at the DVBS meeting.
Thank you.
Now back to you, Anthony. That is Irene Kamau, who is the director of Action Now Kenya, saying that, Ukur should prioritize in his budget, the high cost of living, because parents are working too hard and have less time with their families, and it's becoming, difficult actually feeding these children at a time now we're looking at children who might end up being malnourished. But now there's something that she's touched on, the issue of devolved corruption. From a leader's point of view, when you're talking about fiscal planning, it's now we have to also plan for graft, as she said. Main boss, you steal from your boss, your employee back at home steals from you, the trickle-down effect. The issue of graft when it comes to fiscal planning.
Yes, Regina, it's unfortunate that in our country, sometimes this kind of devolved corruption, as you have called it, begins from budget making with our politicians.
Okay.
And some of the leaders are always aware of what is going to come to their covers, and they have already strategized on how they are going to take it away from Mama Mboga or the common person. Regina, we have a beautiful country, and we also spoil it with our own hands. Some of the leaders in the office, of course, not necessarily themselves, but their close allies, have already strategized on how the money, when it is going to come down in this budget, they know how they're going to get it. Now, how the common person can protect himself, or how we, Mama Mboga or Baba Mboga, Baba Mkate, can also protect himself from such corruption, is by pointing out and being honest that some of the leaders, especially this election period, trying to get these elective offices, are not being sincere in themselves. Just for instance, just take for example, people who have a background of corruption, or they have court cases pending, just because they have not been proven guilty is not also a reason that they are not guilty either. But if we look into the way the political leaders gives hope to people, they can be told that, we're gonna build a matoke industry, banana factory, avocado factory, things like that, bringing even to people which will never come. But when that money comes into their covers, that money is just twisted in another way.
Mm-hmm. I hear you talking about the issue of integrity, that we need to elect leaders of integrity. Now, since you're a member of parliament, you're aspiring, member of parliament for Kitutu Masaba constituency, which happens to be in Nyamira County. Quick word to those people who you want to vote for you. Quick word as you come. Bring this to a close.
To the people of Kitutu Masaba, I humbly come to you and I humbly ask you that question the integrity of the people who are coming to you for votes. Not every leader has anything good or has good hopes for you. In Kitutu Masaba,
use camera 5. That one is camera 5, so that they can directly get your features and know who is talking to them. That one is yours.
Thank you. There are people of Kitutu Masaba. We've been electing leaders over time, and mostly we've been electing based on Naumism. That now means the people that somebody has been contesting so much and losing now, let's be merciful to him or to her so that he can also enjoy the covers, or he can enjoy the leadership. Leadership integrity is very important. And I ask our people also to see the Davidism in some leaders, that a leader can come once and you can see straightforward that the policies or the manifesto that brought to you will bring you some leadership. I come to you so that I can become a servant of the people. Servant leadership. That's what I'm bringing to you. And most importantly, I want to devolve all the resources that come to the 6 wards of Kitutu Masaba. That means, Regina, that the CDF kitty will be divided. At least every ward in Kitutu Masaba will get at least 5 million from the CDF kitty. So Kitutu Masaba receives about 147 million in CDF. So I promise my people that 5 million to each ward, which will be called a ward fund.
Indeed. Now you've had that. We're talking about integrity, and we have been speaking to Anthony Nyambane Ogato, who is an aspiring member of parliament for Kitutu Masaba constituency there. We gave him an opportunity to actually address his constituents there, since he's going to be running for active office come August 9th. Matters of integrity, matters of how we plan in as far as, government planning is concerned. Today's budget day, so we are open to your views in regard to what are your expectations come 3 p.m. today. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Now let's go to the Nairobi Central Business District, where we have our reporter Doreen Range there. Just bring us up to speed. How is the environment? What is what are Kenyans saying in his regard to the budget presentation that is set for this afternoon? Doreen, to you. Good morning.
Well, clearly there's a lot of expectation from Kenyans in respect to this year's budget, and I'm just about to engage quite a number of them in what they really expect the CS Treasury to address in this 3.3 trillion budget this afternoon. Remember, as you had mentioned earlier, in that budget there's actually a deficit of over 800 billion Kenyan shillings, and also what we know is that about 1.3 to 1.4 trillion is supposed to go to the financing of our debt as a country, which actually is of last year, December, the debt stands at 8.2 trillion. That is after that debt ceiling was raised in 2019 from 6 to 9 trillion. And even as we speak, there's conversations to raise it further to 12 trillion. And obviously what this portends for Kenyans is perhaps digging deeper into their pockets. And even as you talk about financing of this budget and ultimately our debt as a country, is that perhaps you could look into either domestic borrowing or even international borrowing. Yes, we talked about the issue of taxes being addressed, but clearly, is that even going to come into place, knowing that we need to finance this budget and ultimately our deficit as a country and even as Kenyans altogether? So even as we talk about this budget altogether, what we need as a country, the deficit therein, the issue of raising the debt ceiling, but exactly what are Kenyans expecting as it pertains to the key issues to be addressed, and which areas particularly do they want more money to be channeled in, and why? That is what we're just about to engage into, and I'm joined by a group of Kenyans who will be telling us what exactly the expectation is. Karibu sana to KBC Channel 1. Dadi, nataka tutuambie jina lako na ni nini haswa unatarajia zungumziwe katika hii budget.
Yes, okay. Kwa majina naitwa Wycliffe Barasa, na kulingana na budget ya leo tunaona ya kwamba mwananchi wa jini ambaye ndiye anaumia zaidi kwa sababu budget iko juu, na ukiangalia haswa sana kuhusu mambo ya food stuff, chakula imeenda juu, kwa maduka. So mwananchi wa kawaida anapitia katika changamoto tofauti, na tungependa sana kama wa Kenya aswa upande wa budget waangazie sana upande wa mambo ya chakula. Alafu upande wa mafuta tunaona pia mafuta inaleta changamoto kwa sababu mafuta ndio imepepa economy yote. Kwa kila kitu lazima tuwe na transport, tuwe na nini, na mafuta ikikosekana bado tuko na changamoto ambazo zinatupata. Kwa hivyo ningependa sana kwa budget ya leo waweze kuangazia sana mambo inahusu na mwananchi wa kawaida kama budget ya kama chakula, foodstuffs, vitu kama hizo. Asante.
Na mara mingi tunazungumzia kwamba we need to finance this budget. Mara mingi tunasema we will always need to borrow from outside. Hii issue ya kuborrow, because again we also need to do that as a country. Wewe kwa mtazamo wako kama Mkenya unaonelea vipi? Okay, upande wa kukopa tunaona kuna changamoto kwa sababu sana haswa pesa ambazo zinakopwa tunapata kwamba kulingana na zile budget ambazo pesa zinastahili, unapata hizo pesa zimepotea, na haswa tena unapata pesa ambazo zinakopwa ni mingi, na alafu tena zinakopwa in terms of dollars whereby na hii dollars ina appreciate kwa kila wakati. So unapata kwamba hii dollars inapo appreciate wakati walikopa baada ya 2 years unapata, so iko na increment ya percentage fulani ya hiyo dola kupanda. Kwa hivyo Wakenya bado watalipa kulingana na hiyo, bado watalipa in terms of dollars na watatumia pesa mingi sana. Kwa hivyo kabla tunaenda kukopa tunafaa kuangazia tuone ni pesa ambazo tunaenda kufanya kukopa zitasaidia mwananchi wa kawaida kwa njia gani. Asante sana. Well, as you just, can hear that the issue is not actually borrowing. We've talked a lot about the question of borrowing in this country, but just from listening to what he's saying is that we need to channel this money to the right places, not just borrowing for the sake of borrowing. But we still continue to sample most of these views from Kenyans, get to hear their mind on what exactly they expect the CS to address. Jina lako na nini hasa unatarajia igusiwe ama ipewe kipaumbele?
Jinangu Steven Omondi, mkaji wa Kibra. Mimi mambo na budget hakuna kitu natarajia huko. Najua tu chumi itaendelea kuwa juu na tumezoea hiyo live. So itakuwa tu hivyo. Venye watataka ndivyo tutaishi.
But wanasema tukue na hope. Why do you look like you've lost hope as a Kenyan?
Sasa itakuwaje kama vitu tulikuwa tunapata na kidogo, sasa imekuwa gharama juu, kila kitu ni gharama. Sasa hope gani tukue nayo kwao? Hope tutakuwa nayo gani kwao? Mimi sioni mafuta mara hakuna, mara nini hakuna, kila saa. Wakaa hivyo, sisi tutapambana.
Serikali kaa hivyo, Wakenya watapambana. Hitu ndio maoni ya Wakenya wengine ambao wanatoa hapa. But we still continue to sample most of these views from Kenyans. We just want to pick what their mind is concerning their expectations. We are told time and again that let's keep hope alive, let's keep our expectations at par. But really with this hard economy, is that even possible? Let's continue to sample what other Kenyans are saying, and particularly also what the expectation is as we await this budget to be read at 3 p.m. Jina lako na matarajio yako ni?
Kevin Onyimbo. Yeah, what I expect from the budget, I expect nothing less because the cost of living is high, the government is borrowing now and again. But I could urge the government that they stop borrowing, we work with our own budget, with what we collect from taxes. But generally, I do not expect nothing because the cost of living, the price of food stuffs is high. I could urge them, they stop some projects that are not necessary so that we be able to work with what we make, what we generate as a revenue from our country. That's what I can urge the government. Yes.
Kevin, how practical is it to just be a developing country and still not be able to borrow to finance our projects?
Okay, borrowing is not bad, but you see with our government, we have hit high in borrowing. We are borrowing, money is getting lost in projects, unfinished projects, and yet the funds were assigned. Later on, we hear that funds have been embezzled. We have very, very many things in our country. The government should first work with foodstuffs, and the projects, they are good, yes, but to some extent they assign funds and they are being stolen. We are being told that money is stolen from those. How is it good that we borrow, the money get lost elsewhere? We do not see the projects, we see them halfway, a quarters, so that one cannot work. I see that we should be working by now with our own revenue, which we correct first, and some projects should stand still. Because you give me a road, you don't give me food on the table, I do not have somewhere to sleep. Does it really make sense? It doesn't make sense that I pass on a good road, yes, I sleep hungry, I don't eat, I depend on one meal a day, I eat only supper, from breakfast and lunch, I do not have something to take. And you are here telling me that we have roads, we have something else. The roads are, I don't see them. I see projects unfinished. So that one really, I do not see that it's working well. With me, I see that they stabilize the food prices. I have something on the depot, then the rest will come later. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Kevin. Well said.
It's okay.
All right, so the question and the issue of reduction on cost. Let's look at what we can do without as a country and still survive. And if at all we have to borrow, let's channel this money to the right areas so that Kenyans can see this development. That is what just Kevin is saying there. But even as we continue to sample their expectations and what Kenyans really are expecting to hear from the CS Treasury, I'm joined now by the representative from Bunge la Wananchi, and I just want him to really break down for us and tell us exactly what he is expecting to see. Is it the same as what we've had, high cost of living, the debt issue, debt crisis? Is it something more than that? Tell us your name and what exactly you're expecting.
Thank you very much. First of all, my name is activist Lawrence Oyugi. I'm one of the rights activists in this great nation. I'm also a member of Bunge la Wananchi. Today is a nice day for Kenyans, and we want to say that with the budget of about 3.3 trillion is good with Kenya. This is the first time we want to support the government, and we want to say that government has at least increased the money. And what we want, we are asking the government, this money, most of the money to be diverted in terms of farming. Wanunulia wa farmers enough fertilizer, na kuhusu maneno vile tumekopesha deni. We want to encourage people to pay tax so that kwa hizi madeni tumeona kazi, serikali imefanya kazi, barabara zimejengwa na mijengo mbalimbali zimeanzishwa katika nchi la Kenya. Ile kitu tunaomba wananchi wenzetu, wananchi wa Kenya, tulipe tax ndio tuweze kulipa hizi madeni, tuweze kukamilisha hizi madeni. Na haya maneno tunaongea ya high increase ya chakula, bei ya chakula imeongezeka. Hapo pia tungependa kusema ya kwamba serikali waonee wananchi huruma, hii maneno ya maziwa ipungue, na tena maneno ya transport, tungependa hii maneno ya transport, serikali wakuje na mbinu nzuri ya kumeswa ya kwamba maneno ya oil imewekwa katika nchi. Tumekuwa na gallery store mzuri ya kuweka mafuta na pesa zingine zikiwa allocated, na tunahakika ile pesa rais alisign juzi ya about 3.4 billion ile upande wa mafuta itatoka katika hii pesa ambayo teacher anaenda kusoma leo ya 3.3 trillion, na tunahakika watu wa mafuta wataanza kazi kama kawaida.
Unasema Wakenya waweze kutoa tax iweze pia kufinance most of projects of the country, but Wakenya wanasema already giving enough. We are digging so much into our pockets.
Actually, we've not given enough. If we can just by an example, juzi hii kambi ya Keroche unaona imefungwa kwa mamilioni ya task. Hiyo ni moja tu ya Wakenya ambayo wamekataa kulipa task. Na haya pesa ndio rais wetu anajaribu kututafutia pesa nje ili tusaidie. Kuna wengine mabwenyenye wanateka advantage ya haya mapesa, wanafunga kwa account yao, na wakisafunga wanakosa kulipa task. Hii ndio inaleta hii shida ambayo tunaona kubwa ya kwamba hatuna deni kubwa. Tukiweza kulipa task katika nchi ya Kenya, sisi tunahakika tutapunguza nguvu ya hii umaskini katika nchi ya Kenya na tuongeze mingi sana kwa ukulima. Yes.
Asante sana. Hatuna shida ya deni. We just need to do our due diligence as Kenyans. Let me get one last review from Kenyan here. Let's listen to what he has to say in respect to matarajio yako wakati budget itakuwa inasomwa mchana huu.
Kwa majina naitwa Joseph Makori. Nimefurahi sana kuona kuwa rais bado anazingatia kuwa budget ya Kenya inaendelea kuenda mbele, inaendelea kuwa mingi. Kitu tunatarajia hii budget iangalie maskini, walete pesa ya kucushion the poor, especially kwa foodstuffs. Kitu ingine tuna expect serikali iendelee kufanya infrastructure development, iendelee kuopen up nchi kwa kutengeneza barabara, iendelee kutengeneza reli, so that the cost of travel iendelee kukuja chini. Tunatarajia kuwa serikali itaongeza pesa ya subsidy kwa mafuta, ndio ikuwe rahisi wananchi maskini kusafiri kwa nauli kidogo. Kitu ingine tunatarajia serikali iongeze pesa, especially farmers wenye wako reserve waendelee kupata subsidy ya fertilizer na ili waingize pesa mfukoni. Kitu ingine tunatarajia healthcare. Serikali kwa sababu ya corona iendelee kuongeza pesa, ndio wale watu wenye wako na ukimwi, zile magonjwa zinasumbua watu kama pneumonia, TB, waendelee kupata dawa ya bure. Na ningefurahi sana kama madawa especially za watoto, madawa kama ya malaria ipeanwe bure. Kwa sababu hii budget ni kubwa sana na watu wako affected sana. Kitu ingine tunatarajia pesa iongezwe ya afya, kwa sababu watu wengi wanaendelea kugonjeka magonjwa kama ya kisukari, magonjwa ya pressure na magonjwa ya kansa. Tunatarajia government itaweka subsidy ya hiyo madawa, ndio Wakenya wengi wafaidika kutoka hii budget. Kitu ingine ya mwisho kabla nimalizie maneno ya shule, kwa sababu kuna universal schooling, serikali itoe pesa ndio wale watoto wenye wako kwa pastoral communities wapate chakula bure, na pia waongeze pesa ya shule za mabweni, ndio watoto maskini waende huko badala ya watu kupigana huko kwa pastoralist communities, wa concentrate na education yao.
Asante sana. Yeah, asante sana. So those are Kenyans' views and perspective. Of course, health dominating their matters with agriculture and fertilizer, the question of high cost of living, debt issue in this country, just to sample a few of Kenyans' expectation in regards to issues that they really want to be addressed. And again, you can remember that also part of what has been suggested, particularly as it pertains to our issue of financing and when it comes to our debt issue in this country, is how about we just reduce on our cost, particularly looking at things that we can do without and still survive as a country, perhaps also stretch our payment when it comes to our loans, and also see how we can renegotiate our interest with the international lenders, and also just delve deeper into what we call the public-private partnership. These are just some of the suggestions that have also come out from a number of economists as it pertains to how we can be able to finance our budget and ultimately even the deficit. And this perhaps is why you've not really had a lot of Kenyans question how the expressway is being funded, because this is how it was funded, through the public-private partnership. So more of trying to look at private financiers to come and finance more of our development projects as a country, as opposed to leaving it all together to the government. So that is what you have, Regina, at least as of now, in respect to what Kenyans are expecting. But we're still here, continuing to sampling more of Kenyans' views as it pertains to this year's budget, that is the 2022-2023 budget.
Thank you very much, Doreen, there for bringing us up to speed with what Kenyans are saying down at CBD there. We understand, 85% of the workstations are within the CBD and its environs. Now, those questions that have been raised by Kenyans, the issue of graft, the issue of, the debt situation, with the majority of Kenyans saying that we need to stop borrowing because the monies borrowed are not being put to proper use owing to graft. draft. As you ponder on that, you take a quick breather. When we're back, we're going to be having a candid conversation with a financial and economist expert, none other than the CEO of African Diaspora Asset Managers, Adam Capital. So do keep it right here. That is Michael Obaga.
Dubbed President Uhuru Kenyatta's final budget. From Treasury to the streets and Parliament. What is contained in Ukur Yatane's briefcase? We unpack the numbers and analyze the statistics to help you understand what is contained in the 2022-2023 budget on KBC Channel 1.
Get ready for the next big thing.
A woman with a voice is by definition a strong woman.
So we need to start bringing out the profession in a woman. When we demonstrate, they will come when we've been tear gassed, not when we want to pass the message.
The Dada's Show is back, a show where women get to be themselves and discuss real issues.
She cannot allow other women to come on the same space because she's getting different privileges from men. So akiona mwanamke, ako like, this is a competitor.
This being an election year, we have given an opportunity to women to express themselves and share their expectations during this critical moment in our country.
The issue of corruption and how it has impacted women and children in this country.
Create jobs for the informal sector, create jobs for the youth who leave the universities.
Hatutaki bora uongozi, tunataka uongozi bora.
Keep your heels, head and standards high. Dadas, coming soon.
Kusema la kweli mimi sina la kusema. Na furahi tu sana sana sana.
Kwa nitakuwa tunahama kila wakati.
Haya yote yameletwa kwa sababu yako wewe mwenyewe na kufutana na Kate.
Kate, bado kesi inaendelea.
Huyo mtu aliyoko hapo ndio chanzo cha mimi kuwa na wazo hilo la kuiuza.
Hebu jiangalie jinsi ulivyo. Huni hata aibu.
Fat distribution, very important to check. It's not about the size of the body. So how do I know that I am obese?
So we now do check often what is someone's waist to hip ratio. Yeah. So as a rule of thumb, if your waist as a man is about 90 centimeters, you're obese. Waist. And we know how to calculate the waist is between. I mean, it's nice for people to check up, you know. So there's a place where your waist is. Your waist can be up here. It's just right up something we call the superior iliac spine. It's just at the bone that it's behind you. So you go around the circumference. So for women above 80 centimeters, the waist, the width of your waist is too big.
Good morning. You're watching Good Morning Kenya, and I'm Regina Manyara. We're talking about matters of budget 2022-2023 to help us better understand, what we should expect as Kenyans. And also in as far as investment is concerned, is none other than the CEO of Adam Capital, Michael Obaga. And Adam Capital is all about, African diaspora asset managers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Now, there we were just doing a survey, the streets of Nairobi there, just trying to pick the brains and what Kenyans have to say in regard to the budget 2020 to 2023. What has come up is they want government to stop borrowing. And one of them has said, Kevin has said that borrowed monies are not being put to proper use owing to the issue of graft. The other person has come out and said, the cost of living is getting out of hand. What are your expectations, Michael Obaga, ahead of the budget presentation this afternoon?
Thank you. So today's budget is being read 2 months earlier compared to the previous one because of the obvious reason of the August poll. We also saw that we're in a unique situation whereby government is also trying to fast track on its delivery of the Agenda 4. And also it's a government in a trilemma because they're trying to balance the issue to do with livelihoods, considering that Kenyans have really been bent out of shape, going by the economic and socio-economic issues surrounding, the fuel prices, the cost of living and livelihoods really being obliterated. But again, it's a government that is not collecting enough in terms of taxes, and also the issue of debt, considering that our debt to GDP ratio is hitting 80%, comparing to the 40% we had 10 years ago. So it's actually doubled. So in today's proposal, I'm looking at the Cabinet Secretary of National Treasury coming up with ways in which they're going to cushion the vulnerable in society, how they're going to improve livelihoods, and most importantly, how they're going to promote SMEs and the private sector so that they can be able to boost what we call the private sector demand. And if we promote the private sector, it means now the livelihoods are going to be better. And we are going to create employment for our young men and women. Yeah.
I like your expectations. They're more positive. And we're looking at, if SMEs actually grow, given that a majority of MSMEs are the ones that are, in terms of numbers, are the ones driving the economy, then I think we have nailed it in as far as leapfrogging the economy after COVID-19. But it's very good on paper.
Yeah.
But actualizing this, let's start off with the fact that government intends to spend a cool 3.3 trillion shillings, where the Kenya Revenue Authority is charged with raising 2.1 trillion shillings. That is 300 billion shillings more than what the target that they had last year, which they didn't meet.
Yeah.
The feasibility of actually the taxman raising this 2.1 trillion shillings, Mr. Obaga.
So we are looking at a deficit of around 500 billion. The deficit is attributed by the fact that this is the biggest, budget being read in the history of Kenya, and we are looking at government really in a trilemma in terms of trying to balance the infrastructure needs of its growing population, which is largely youthful and learned, and we are looking at also another challenge to do with the growing debt, and also we are looking at a government that is unable to collect enough so that it can be able to suffice its budgets.
Now, when you say government unable to collect enough, let me take you back to the Finance Bill 2021. We've had changes over this financial year, I think 3 times in Parliament, just trying to improve that and such so that it can help, government raise these funds. Are we looking at a situation where we are going to have a change, especially in the Finance Bill this 2022, looking at the income tax as we saw last year? Is that something that we can say that we...
I don't foresee a tax rebate. I don't foresee any tax, advantages being proposed. But I see I look at a proposal whereby the Cabinet Secretary is going to come up with ways in which they're going to increase, their tax bracket, casting their nets wider in order to capture the largely untaxed informal sector. Kenya has always suffered the burden of the informal sector, and I'm talking this as a result of the economy. 80% of the economy, Kenya's GDP, 80% of it is anchored by the informal sector, informal jobs, and 20% is the formal sector. But when you come to look at the numbers in terms of tax, and the tax we're able to collect is largely from the formal sector as opposed to the informal sector. The large proportion of the informal sector are not, being levied their income
not paying
tax.
taxes.
They're not paying income tax.
This has been a conversation that we've had. We've had government hammer it down every now and then. We want to widen our tax bracket to include the informal sector, and it has not happened yet. Why would it happen now?
Now, it won't happen now because of a number of reasons. First of all, you're in an electioneering period. The August polls are just here, and there's always something called psephology. Psephology is basically the study of voting patterns. So when politicians generally look at the voting patterns, and we're headed into a poll, this will be the worst time to introduce tax policies, especially targeting a larger proportion of the population. Number two, tax policies are usually implemented or drafted by economists and professionals, but at the end of the day, they are handed over to politicians who are going to look into the implementation and have them implemented. But now we do face the challenge of the political necessity for compromise. You get most governments come into place, not just in Kenya, world over, with an ambitious economic policy in place, taxation policy in place, but they end up getting compromised by the fact that, one, we do have interests, number two, we do have government formations through partnerships, other governments, the people come on board to form government with different economic policies, so we end up diluting the original economic policy or tax policy that was in place.
Now, in the same breath, since we've said we are, geared towards the election, can we hope, can Wanjiku hope that they will remember that they need us to cast that vote come 9th and at least give us something? Is it possible?
Today's budget proposal, I'm looking at ways. I'm looking at ways in which the cabinet secretary is going to, create an economic or accelerate economic recovery, considering that the economy is trying to recover in the wake of the COVID crisis that clearly obliterated most of the economic livelihoods and even lives. And we're also looking at how government is going to stabilize the economic resilience. Hands down, we have to give it up to the economy. We've really tried to be resilient. So those are the two areas I'm looking at, this statement, the budget statement going to be anchored on. And that will include trying to protect livelihoods, jobs, SMEs, the informal sector, and also the private sector. How government is going to caution the vulnerable in society. You're looking at the retirees, the people without jobs. So we are likely to see proposals around those areas. We're likely also to see proposals that are going to promote employment creation. So we're looking at possibility of government coming up with ways in which they're going to spur employment amongst the larger young population.
So we keep the hope.
Yeah, we have to.
It's not all gloom.
Not all gloom.
Not all gloom. Now, you've talked about the issue of, the tax policy. Ukur Yatani has been quoted saying that there, plans are underway to just have a harmonized and at least not an abstract tax policy. But that has not been done yet. And this has created, anxiety around investors. They don't know, they're waiting. They've adopted a wait and see. And how has this affected our investment? Given that you're an investment, expert, how has this then affected our investment?
Investments are basically, let me talk about the investment markets in general.
Yes.
Investment markets are basically a reflection of the economic conditions in which they operate.
Yes.
So if a given country or a given jurisdiction is going through a challenging economic environment, you're likely to see it being mirrored or reflected on its investment markets. So we are looking at a proposal that we are likely to see a proposal from government that is going to to caution investors, especially foreign investors, during this time of the election period, considering that it's has always been a cycle that every 5 years we have to have a flight to safety by the foreign investors, and apparently the foreign investors form the majority of the investors at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. We're looking at 80%. So whenever we're getting into elections and then we have a flight to safety, a flight for safety by the foreign investors, remember they are paid in dollar, therefore it means it's going to give a pressure on the Kenyan shilling. Yeah. Therefore, that's why we always see these, inflation periods, especially during every election period.
Whoa. Okay, so we're in flight as we speak.
So currently, majority foreign investors are on a flight to safety.
But now, would you think if we had a structured tax policy, it would also ease the uncertainty around, investment, not just looking at foreign investors, but also within the private sector?
Now, the biggest challenge has been coming up with structures. It's undeniable that we do need, a policy that is going to govern our tax administration. But the challenge has been coming up with structures that are going to access the informal sector, structures that are going to be favoring the formal sector as well, because we need to favor the formal sector so that we're able to attract foreign businesses and FDIs, that is foreign direct investments in Kenya. But again, the biggest challenge has been coming up with structures on how they're going to implement, policies, tax policies, especially targeting the large informal sector we have in Kenya. Yeah.
Now that informal sector is something that is getting out of hand, so to speak, yet they are the majority, but hey, we'll still get there. In this particular budget, the government is also expecting to raise a cool 300 billion shillings in appropriation and aid.
Yeah.
Now, the situation around government entities or other public entities, Ukur Yatani himself has said that they're seeking to adopt, restructuring among loss-making parastatals. Yet they have a target of raising 300 B from these particular parastatals. What's your take on that?
It is a bit of contradiction, and if a parastatal is failing, there's nothing you can do about it, and the best proposal could have been to let them go. If they're going, we can't until how long are we going to keep on supporting loss-making machines in the name of parastatals? Government has no business, and government should have no business in business. Business should be left to the informal sector, and government should only provide a level playing field so that they can be able to spur growth in the private sector. So government should, privatize institutions or parastatals that are not profit-making, and give an opportunity to the private sector to run these institutions. And we've seen the track record we're having from the private sector, because at the end of the day, the growth of any economy is premised on the principle of aggregate demand. So what that means is that government spending it's crucial. Informal sector spending through consumer spending. We also look at investor spending through the private sector. So all that put in place makes up our GDP. So we're looking at government spending, consumer spending, private spending through the private investment companies, and also foreign trade. So whether government is winning or the private sector is winning, at the end of the day, it's a win to the Kenyan economy.
Now, that's a very thorny issue, especially when you look at the failing parastatals, one of them being the national carrier, that is Kenya Airways. It has been on bailouts left, right, and center, still on the red, but in its last report, it has somewhat, still in the red in as far as losses are concerned, but it has reduced its losses.
Yeah.
Very thorny issue. Let me just pick your brain on that. Should we privatize the national carrier?
Yeah, that is something. It is a thorny issue, and for me, looking at it from an investment perspective, if you have a venture that is not making any profit, then you rather let it go and have it managed by more prudent, professionals than having it to government because of the what you call the moral fabric of Kenyans, knowing that this is an institution being run by government, therefore they're not more prudent in terms of running it. But again, we remain hopeful with the results they are able to post, and we're looking forward to the national carrier jumping back into profitability. Yeah.
Thank you for your opinion on that.
Yeah,
I know it's way out of budget, but when you're talking about government expecting to raise this amount of money through appropriations and aid, and we're talking about restructuring, mergers and closures, here we are. A bit contradictory. Thank you for that clarification. Now, we've been talking about 3.3 trillion, of which we have a deficit of around 846.1 billion shillings.
Yeah.
Yes, government intends to borrow.
Of course.
Public debt by the end of December 2021 stood at 8.2 trillion shillings. We even don't want to look at the figures of 2022. They're not out yet, the first quarter. But hey, that's where we are. Government intends to borrow that money. Before we look at the figures, where government intends to borrow, because it's going to be external
or domestic
and domestic. Before we get down to the figures, was there an option? Was there another option to borrowing?
Borrowing is not bad, and what is bad is excessive borrowing, because now you'll start looking at the debt to GDP ratios and all that. But again, if you borrow from the developed nation, for example, the UK or the US, when you look at their debt to GDP ratio is way above 100%. Kenya's debt to GDP ratio is at 80%. Therefore, there is nothing wrong with borrowing. Actually, government has an obligation to borrow under the fiscal policy, because how else do we expect government to raise funds?
Because government does not have its money.
It doesn't have.
Yes.
So it relies on taxes, collecting tax revenues, and also borrowing. So the only challenge we have with these debts is that most of these debts are not, their terms are not favorable to Kenyans, and therefore that's why you're giving a proposal, and we hope, CS is going to capture that on his policy in terms of maybe trying to avoid commercial debts and maybe inclining more on concessional debts, so that they can be able to, have that breath of fresh air in terms of flexibility, in terms of accessing more generous, rates of return, in terms of interest, the loan interest, and also having more, a longer tenor in terms of payment of these debts. So the recommendations on debt should be maybe tilting more towards concessional loans and also avoiding the commercial loans.
Now, government intends to borrow a cool 70 actually. Yeah. I reduced it now by 20, but 70.2 billion shillings from the local market.
Yeah.
What impact will it have on the economy? I'm worried about crowding out the private sector.
Yeah.
Is this something that we should be worried about?
It goes without saying that whenever government is going to start borrowing domestically, and they're looking at a figure around 700 billion?
570.
Yeah, 570 billion being borrowed domestically, and then we have 200 and around 240 billion, borrowing from the, from the international players. So local borrowing brings out a crowding effect, like you said, because now local banks are not going to continue lending to SMEs, because SMEs, individuals like you and me, are considered high risk.
High risk.
So when government gives an opportunity they tend to, lend more to government, considering that government is, basically the bank of the last resort. Government cannot default, and because taxes have to be paid at the end of the day. So we have that scenario of, banks going to, considering government more compared to SMEs, and therefore it's going to bring out a crowding effect, and it means it's going to suck up credit.
So now what does this say with government saying that it's going to focus on, supporting the MSMEs, and the issue of credit, especially to MSMEs, has been quite the issue, the crux of the matter there. And yet on the other hand, this borrowing locally crowds them out from that accessing credit.
Yeah, it's a puzzle, and like I said, it's a government in a dilemma, because now how are they going? It's going to be a delicate balancing act between trying to borrow domestically, using the Kenya shilling, because it's going to favor them in terms of payment. At the same time, they're going to give to create a conducive environment for our livelihoods through SMEs and MSMEs. So it's a delicate balancing act, and we're likely to. It's going to be interesting to wait and see how it's going to capture it in the.
Now, what pressure? What is the likely pressure that this is going to put in as far as interest rates are concerned? Given where we are in as far as the value of the shilling, some experts have opined and said that by the time we're hitting June, thereabout, the shilling may be falling to the greenback at least trading at $1 to 130 Kenya shillings. That is a likelihood. The pressures on the shilling vis-a-vis the pressure on the interest
rates.
Yeah.
Now, it's undeniable that the shilling is going to be under pressure, and we've seen measures the Treasury is trying to undertake in order to caution the shilling from falling, against the dollar. We've seen, the kind of credit facilities that a government has been able to secure from IMF. In terms of trying to cushion and also to increase our foreign reserves, so that they can be able to have dollar currencies in our reserves, so that they stand strong against the dollar. Number two, we've seen the diaspora remittances really trying to support the Kenya shilling. So it's undeniable that the Kenyan shilling is being anchored by the diaspora remittances, and that's not how it should be. So last month, in the month of December last year, we had up to 40 billion worth of diaspora remittances into the country, and they've really played a major role in terms of in trying to anchor the shilling against the dollar. So, but again, the election you're getting into is not really helping the situation. So it means the Kenya shilling remains in a tight spot, trying to stand strong against the dollar. Yeah.
Now, there's been talk about, some list of growth.
Yeah.
Tourism sector as well as the financial services sector. Will this particular growth that we have seen, given that tourism is a bit shaky, given that this is an election year and such, given the last time we actually hit the target was way before the post-election violence and in 2011. Stakeholders are optimistic that we're in smooth sailing. However, the impact that this growth is going to have, the tourism sector and the financial services sector, in as far as the GDP growth is concerned, can we count on it?
In terms of the contribution of tourism into the GDP, into our economy, it's been less than 10%, and the COVID crisis didn't help it either. It worsened the situation. So we're looking at recovery in these sectors, and we're expecting these sectors to be the key sectors that the Cabinet Secretary is going to look at in terms of policy and how to accelerate their recovery, especially we're looking into tourism and also hospitality. So these are the sectors we expect government to come in strongly, so that they can be able to promote the livelihoods around those sectors.
Now let's look at agriculture. We've been talking about food security. It's part of the Big Four agenda, and we have seen in the latest the zero rating of yellow maize to just lower the cost of animal feeds and such. But now we're also dealing with a drought, situation in the country, over-reliance on rain-fed agriculture. As we are waiting the presentation of the budget there to speak, would we say that we expect that also Ukur Yatani to focus on the agriculture sector as one of the gainers in as far as budgetary allocation is concerned?
He should have, but I don't expect, from what we're saying, we don't expect a generous allocation into agriculture, considering that we're in a government that is exiting the scene, and we're likely to see a more generous allocation into the Big Four agenda. You're looking at healthcare, infrastructure, and education, as opposed to
housing,
and housing that is under infrastructure. Therefore, we're likely to see a smaller allocation into agriculture, considering that agriculture tend to take, allocations in agriculture are not instant in terms of the results, so they tend to take some time in order to see the effects. Now, however, government should allocate more into activities such as irrigation, subsidizing the subsidies, fertilizer and other farm input subsidies, because at the end of the day, agriculture contributes a lot into our GDP. Yeah.
Now, talking about subsidies and such, now let's head back to the streets and find out what is going on. Today's budget day. So, Doreen, if you can hear me, what do you have for us from the CBD? Good morning once again.
All right, as I promised, we are still in Nairobi CBD, continuing to sample most of Kenyan views as it pertains to this 2022-2023 budget, and particularly what exactly they expect the CS to address. And from archives, we come here to where a good number of matatu operators are actually stationed. Could it still be the issue, the question of fuel? You are live on KBC Channel 1. Tuambie matarajio yako ni yapi?
Matarajio kwanza, mimi naitwa Nikasio Choka Jason. Matarajio yangu ni wakati budget watakuwa kisoma waweze kuangalia sana mambo ya mafuta. Mafuta imetusumbua vizuri sana, na magari mingi hapa Nairobi wakati wasafiri tunasafirisha wasafiri magari mingi inakatia mafuta njiani. Kwa hivyo hata bei mafuta imekuwa juu, ile pesa gari inapata inaenda, alafu iwezi rudisha zile pesa imekunywa kwa mafuta. Kwa hivyo ningeomba serikali waweze kuminimize mambo ya mafuta ili magari iweze kuwa chini.
All right, so clearly again the issue and the question of fuel coming into play. So let's speak to other sets of Kenya, try to also listen into what exactly they expect the CS to address. Na vile ambavyo tunamsikia kwake anasema ni mambo ya mafuta. Wewe kama abiria, ni nini hasa unataka ikuwe addressed this afternoon?
Okay, what I may expect the government or just the treasury to address is the issue about what many issues that are affecting every Kenyan or an ordinary Kenyan. Especially we have a lot of issues going on in our country, like a drought. I was expecting, I would expect the government would address that issues in a way that they will be having a ways of how to cope up with drought and famine and these issues affecting every fuel issues. We have these goods, most food and items are at high cost, you see. So we are expecting the government to have a way to provide solutions, especially allocating more funds on those issues, on subsidizing farming, fund to be allocated to subsidize farming inputs and output, and providing more money on those people who are suffering in our semi-arid and arid areas in Kenya. That's what it's a matter of concern in the country. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And clearly around this place is just a beehive of activities. Actually, I'm at the famous tea room area where a good number of passengers are boarding vehicles, some just alighting from the Mount Kenya region. So clearly around this place a beehive of activities. And again, just from what you've heard from these two Kenyans, clearly the question of drought taking center stage, fuel also taking center stage. So before we get to wrap it up from Kenyans' views, let's get to listening to one last Kenyan on what exactly they want the CS to address this afternoon. Majina yako na nini hasa unataka ipewe kipaumbele?
Okay, mimi naitwa Davis Dega, mimi ni mwanafunzi. Kulingana na mimi Kwanza ningependa CS aangazie sana mambo ya mafuta. Mafuta, ongezeko la bei la mafuta limeathiri sana hasa vyakula na uchumi umeweza kwenda juu sana. Unapata vyakula na kusafiri imekuwa shinda sana. Naam.
Unataka mafuta kabisa iangaliwe?
Mafuta kabisa iangaliwe. Hiyo ndo shinda kabisa Kenya.
Kwa hivyo ikiangaliwa uko sawa kama Mkenya?
Na bei ya vyakula itaweza kushuka na tutakuwa sawa kabisa.
Santi, you can remember that the president assented that budget that was actually on Monday, whereby it's supposed to go to oil marketers and to see how well they can stabilize the fuel prices. But picking from what the PS said is that so far they've already channeled 8.2 billion, and the remaining amount they'll channel it over time. So clearly, again, much as this was done and some money was already channeled to oil marketers, it still remains a pertinent issue to a good number of Kenyans, the question on the issue of fuel, because we obviously know that fuel is a very important factor of production, and any time there's shortage of wheat, or even if it goes high, then ultimately the ripple effect is always felt in the cost of living, and that's why we're also experiencing that as a country. So that is what you have this morning as it pertains to Kenyans' perspective when it comes to what exactly they want to be addressed. But also what I can say is that let's just also wait to see how we are going to finance this budget, and again the deficit that presents itself in this budget. What exactly will the CS address, and what exactly will he say in terms of how we are going to finance and how we are going to meet our deficit? We take a very quick breather. We come back with more Good Morning Kenya. Stay with us.
changes, technologies grow, and so you need to be in the know. We bring you tech news from all over the world.
Me, I understand science revolves around life.
Tech policies and programs, Take on Tech has your back. Coming to your screens every Saturday at 4:30 p.m. only on KBC Channel 1. Join me, Stephanie Ayeta and Grace Gidaiga, as we serve you with only the best tech updates the world over.
As part of the government policy to achieve 10% forest cover, conservatory and protection of the ecosystem, Radio Ingo, in conjunction with Kakamega County, Kenya Forest Services and National Environmental Management Authority, NEMA, will participate in tree planting at the Kakamega Forest on 8th of April 2022 and on 9th of April 2022. A church service will be held at St. Paul Muyenga Anglican Church of Kenya in Kakamega. Let's plant trees for a better tomorrow.
He killed his wife, Pinky.
Don't act like you're surprised. You gave birth to him, Mom. In order to get married to me, he killed his wife with his own hands. And now, to get another woman, who knows what he's capable of?
Step aside!
Why are you beating him? Who gave you the right to do that? Didn't I tell you? I truly love him. You kept saying that since you've decided to get a divorce with her, you'd cut all ties with her.
Divorce?
What did you say?
You may just do some asking around.
Mundos divididos por una sombra de traición.
Alonso must never know about this. He mustn't.
He should. Alonso also needs to know. Because of these secrets, our family has gone through so much sorrow and suffering.
You can consider it a miracle. Don't worry, Doctor, because we're going to do everything that is necessary.
What matters most right now is for him to regain his health.
I don't want to break her heart. I want to mend it.
Are you trying to mock me?
No.
Hey, you're not going anywhere until you tell me where your son is.
Let go of me. I don't
Just
know.
answer me.
You're
Answer
hurting
me.
I don't know where he is. You are the son of Leonardo del Rio.
Lying heart.
Fue sembrando el veneno y la ambición.
Good morning, I'm Regina Manyara and you're watching Good Morning Kenya right here on KBC Channel 1. It is Budget Day. What are your expectations? Keep tweeting. Our official station handle is at KBC Channel 1. Mine is at Ray Manyara. With us in studio is the CEO of Adam Capital, that is Michael Obaga. And in case you're wondering what Adam Capital is all about, or what it really means, it's African Diaspora Asset Managers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So before we took a short break, our reporter on ground, Dorina Range, was doing a survey, so to speak, and a majority of Kenyans, actually, she was talking to, Kenyans as well as motorists. They've raised the issue of the high cost of living, the uncertainty around the fuel shortage. OMCs received their monies, but they came out and said, owing to the previous delays, we're looking at 10 days of normalcy. Ahead of the budget, is this something that government can do to ensure that, Kenyans do not ever get themselves in such a situation when it comes to supply chain disruptions in as far as petroleum products are concerned?
Thank you. So on the issue you're having, the crisis you're having around the fuel crisis, it's as a result of the panic. That's what they've said. But again, if you look closely, even before, we already had the broken supply chains, and then we had the whatever we call the imported inflation as a result of the broken supply chains. But generally, we need a policy around, our, the way in which we look at the fuel issues in Kenya, because whenever we have such a crisis, it means it's going to have a ripple effect across all, the goods we have, which are the consumer goods, and that now will bring some inflation. So there is need, I do agree with you, there is need for policy that is more clear and how government should be able to tackle such crises in future.
Indeed. Yeah. We'll be looking at that or keeping tabs on that. Everyone is worried. Jokes have been made, especially on social media, with some opting, now we are biking now we are carpooling, others now Subaru drivers be on the lookout, no overspeeding, spare my foot. I mean, it's something else. And also we've been seeing other memes going around, families now measuring their cooking oil and such. That's where we are. And conversation around the Kadogo economy coming back. We will get there as we're talking about investment.
But I feel like the carpooling, there's nothing wrong with carpooling, and maybe it's something we need to have in the society, that it's not a must that everybody drives into the CBD. We can be able to carpool. Maybe government needs to look into the city's metro, the train metro system that is going to connect the CBD and the neighboring counties. Maybe it's going to be a solution to our transportation crisis we have whenever we have a fuel crisis. And maybe these are policy issues that can be able to solve more than one issue. So, for example, if government comes up with a high-speed metro system that is going to serve the CBD and the neighboring counties, it means you're going to solve the issue of traffic congestion on our roads, at the same time solve the housing issue, because now there is no need for me to live within Nairobi. I can be able to live in Machakos, Limuru, Thika, and still work from CBD comfortably.
Yeah. I think that's why they came up with the BRT.
Yeah.
We are yet to see it come to fruition.
Yeah.
That we hope the paint on the thicker roads,
and actually the majority of these projects, for example the BRT, the metro train systems, are projects that can easily be financed not through borrowing but through PPPs.
Yes. We'll be waiting on that. Now, to digress, there's an issue that Kenyans keep on, everyone will be sampling. They're talking about debt, government appetite, borrowing appetite from a financial point of view. What is your take on government's borrowing appetite?
Debt can be good, debt can be bad. Good debt is the one that is going to finance an asset. Bad debt is the one you're taking to buy, I don't want to call it a liability, but an asset that is not going to increase your income. Now, is government justified by the kind of debt it's having? Yes, it is. It has a right to borrow. That is one of the ways in which government raises funds. Now, is the debt being channeled into the right projects? Yes, government is channeling the money essentially into infrastructure projects, which are extensive when it comes to the funds.
Let me be the devil's advocate at that point. We had Kevin come out and say, yes, munaniambia kuna barabara. Yeah. And he spoke in Swahili. Ninaona kuna barabara, but I'm only taking dinner.
But you see, Kenyans need to come to a realization that a government has to spend. And again, for them to foster growth in our economy, they have to promote government spending. How does government spend? It spends through infrastructure projects. It has to create hospitals. It has to create roads. Because for us to spur economic growth, we need to have roads. We need to have the expressway. We need to have the SGR carrying goods from Mombasa, the port into the CBD and other parts of the country. So we are going through a crisis, but this short-term pain for long-term benefit. We might not be the beneficiaries of these projects, but when you look forward, like we say in investments, markets are forward-looking, then it means the future generation is going to reap a lot from the current projects that the government is doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kevin better understand that, and so many other Kevins out there. Now, the 846.1 billion shillings debt happens to be 6% of GDP in this year's budget. What is your take?
It's worrying, and the deficit, we should always ensure that our budget is within our budget. We saw a proposal where the cabinet secretary is coming up on how to cap the deficit at 400 billion and at 3% of the GDP. It's a good move, and it's generally tailored to avoid, in order to ensure that government doesn't again go, increasing the debt ceiling, which is currently at 9 trillion.
Now, talking about the debt ceiling and government going and increasing it, there's been talk that, there's a proposal by Treasury to raise the debt ceiling from the current 9 to around 12 trillion shillings. And yet we're here talking about our debt situation. Come June, a majority of our debt, or rather loans, are coming to maturity. Are we seeing a debt restructuring? Is debt restructuring actually in the offing? Because the numbers don't look so good.
Yeah, they have no option. They have to restructure and take more concessional loans. The majority of this debt is also going into recurrent expenditure, which is not a good thing, as opposed to going into development. Previously, government has been borrowing to pump the money into infrastructure development that was intended to have a trickle-down effect. Considering that government is spending more on infrastructure, then we expect some incentives in terms of the trickle-down effect onto the economy. But again, considering that infrastructure projects take time for us to realize the benefits, it means Kenyans will continue being bent out of shape, at least for the near future. But again, it will depend with the incoming government policy. The government that is coming in, the kind of policies they're likely to have, whether they are going to be more on GDP in terms of government spending. We don't expect the incoming government to consider concentrating on infrastructure as a way of trying to, government spending as a way of trying to grow our GDP, as opposed to consumer spending and private sector spending. Therefore, focus should be more on how government is going to accelerate economic recovery and also promote livelihoods by promoting the private sector and also the MSMEs, at the same time trying to promote consumer spending so that you can have that purchasing power to purchase your consumer goods and basic commodities. And it will mean that one now will be felt at the grassroots level, because currently what you're having is that GDP is growing at 5.6%, but at the same time it's not being felt by the mwananchi because it's largely government driven. The GDP is driven by the government spending as opposed to consumer spending or corporate spending.
Now that you've mentioned that the incoming government, what is the fate of the Big Four agenda? Given that this particular budget has been dubbed the legend Uhuru Kenyatta's final budget, the legend budget, the legacy budget, actually, the legacy budget. What happens to the Big Four agenda projects, given that we see even from the World Bank saying, in as far as stalled projects are concerned, they're at around 40% and they're holding a cool 9 trillion shillings.
Now, like we said, and I agree, it's going to be a legacy budget in the sense that it's going, the Big Four agenda is going to have a very generous allocation because you're looking at a president who's going, and he really wants to ensure that his programs under the Big Four agenda are, completed, or rather, even if they're not completed, but there is enough budget around those projects so that it can have a legacy. So we're likely to see a very generous allocation in the Big Four agenda, infrastructure, healthcare, and education. And with that, we're likely to see a less allocation in agriculture, and understandably so, because the president is also trying to leave a mark in society. Is going out, but again, he has to ensure that every nip and tuck, especially in the programs that are under the Big Four agenda, is well taken care of.
Like, for instance, I know in manufacturing and the cost of power has been such an issue, and under the BPS in the 2022-2023 proposed budget, around 364.3 billion shillings is going to go to the energy sector, and part of it is going to pay the second phase. The president came and addressed Kenyans and told them, hey, we're going to have a 30% cost reduction in the cost of power. Only the first phase has been implemented, but out of this 364.3 billion shillings is going to go to that. We will wait and see. Maybe then the cost of production in as far as manufacturing is concerned, will go down. But now my issue, when you look at the Big Four agenda, there was the issue of affordable housing. When we started and when we had these pronouncements, we were targeting 1 million housing units. It was revised down to 500,000. So far, we have 1,000 housing units that are complete. In as much as we are trying to be generous to see these through, there are some of these projects that are not likely to actually meet the target. From where I sit, I'm looking at housing. Or how can we jumpstart
I
that?
feel like government failed in the approach they took on affordable housing, because the concept they had is government coming in and trying to come up with their own projects, housing projects. But the affordable housing agenda can be best met through the PPPs. That is the best way in which government can come in to offer incentives and make it easier for developers, especially in the real estate, to come up with the affordable housing for their own, for their own clients, and also for even the most lowest cadre Kenyan who can be able to now be able to afford a house. So such projects are best met by partnering with the private sector, and we've seen it's possible through the expressway. Therefore, that is the way to go in terms of that particular agenda.
Projects. Yeah. So I remember the housing levy just was dropped. Yeah. Anyway, that's that. We are here now. Now, talking about the debt, and you have said that it's definitely debt restructuring is going to happen. We have IMF here, and it has been captured by one of our various dailies this morning, just saying that the International Monetary Fund has set various conditions for Kenya to continue accessing loans. One of the ways, or rather one of the pressures that IMF is putting on Kenya, is to complete the medium-term revenue strategy that is expected to identify, a coherent tax policy and administrative measures to widen the tax base by at least 2024. So we are seeing even the lenders coming in and saying, hey guys,
You need to widen your brackets.
Yes, we need to widen our bracket. But now also the definition is who falls under the category of jua kali, or rather the informal sector. I find that there's an issue there. Is that
it has always been a definition issue, basically on defining who is really SME, who's informal, who's not, informal, and like we said, 80% of the economy is being, our GDP is being contributed by the people in the informal sector. Hands down, we have to give it up to them. This is where money lies. And where there is cash flow, that's where government should go. So there is need to have structures in the informal sector. There is need to ensure that government has ways in which it's going to monitor the activities in the informal sector, so that they can not only tax the MSMEs, but also come up with ways in which they're going to address their problems, so that they can be able to improve their livelihoods and then collect more. In terms of increasing taxes for the already overburdened Kenyans, no.
Please no. I'm with you on that. Please no. I don't think we can
survey has it. Actually, if you lower high taxes by 1%, you're likely to increase your overall tax collection by 2 or 3%. Therefore, let's not overburden the already taxed Kenyans who are already bent out of shape in a crisis, in the wake of a COVID crisis. Instead, let's come up with structures that are going to increase our tax bracket by focusing on the informal sector, focusing on how we can be able to create more employment in the informal sector, and also protect livelihoods and caution the vulnerable in society.
Indeed. Now, we have been asking you what are your expectations of the budget. We expect that Ukur Yatani, that is the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, is going to be presenting the 2022-2023 budget from Parliament buildings as of this afternoon at 3 p.m. So what are your expectations? Just to sample but a few, our Twitter handle remains at KBC Channel 1. Mine is at Ray Manyara. Let me sample a few that we have gotten here. So we have Mohammed Fatuma says, concerning the budget, we want to raise the issue of engaging counties at their assemblies to have a budget on supporting parenting issues and empower parents on child protection. The other issue is family tracing when children need to be repatriated or reintegrated to families. These are views coming from members of CAC there that deals with matters of children. Also, we have Jacqueline from Kajiado who says, I would like to see allocation on OCSCs and capacity buildings for CSOs. Once again, the counties need to be well equipped in as far as children rescue centers are concerned. Then lastly but not least, from Adanje from Kilifi, if a ministry is set up for children, there should be a well thought out due diligence to avoid wastage and proper placement of departments with the intent of making them effective and operational. These are just some of the views that are coming in regard to various stakeholders, what they want addressed on top of what we are getting from morning here is that Kenyans are concerned about the high cost of living, and they're really waiting to see what Ukur Yatani has in store for them in as far as the briefcase is concerned, to ensure that they have more money in their pockets and they have the purchasing power when it comes to matters basics. Now we cross over to matters investment. When we talk about fiscal planning, we are also looking at where we are in as far as the economy. And Kenya has been priding itself as wanting to be an investment hub for the region. Where do we stand?
Kenya still remains the investment hub in the region, and we're looking how Kenya as a country is warming up into the Ethiopian market. We saw the other day the DRC was able to be the newest kid on the block on the East African community. Are we taking the opportunities as they come? Yeah, we are. You can see many corporates are getting into the DRC, Equity Bank, to name just a few. Safaricom PLC is getting into Ethiopia. Yeah. Therefore, those are telltale signs that you are taking these opportunities without, wasting any time. Now, are they good opportunities? I look at the population, I look at the demographics, Ethiopia, DRC, anytime. So I'm looking at a possibility or an opportunity for private sector in terms of expanding their strategic plans and getting into this new jurisdiction, and also making their balance sheet as strong as possible. Yeah.
So now, let's come to the ease of doing business.
Yeah.
If we still are, the ideal investment destination, when it comes to ease of doing business, the rankings have it, but now on ground, what is the situation on ground from an investment point of view?
Yeah, it's still challenging going by the number of levies an SME has to pay to part with in order to establish business. On paper, it's easy to register a company. These days, it only takes a day or two to have a business name registered and a company name, of course, incorporated. Those are wins, and we cannot take them away from government. But in terms of levies being done by the county government are overwhelming to the SMEs, and we need lobby groups to come up with ways in which they're going to ensure that we have a uniform levy policy at county level in order to avoid the double taxation being carried out by county governments. Instead of them, they should come up with more innovative ways to raise their own revenue. Like I said, when you reduce high taxes by 1%, you are likely to increase your overall tax revenue by 2 or 3%. It's been proven. So governments, especially county governments, should ensure that they're making it easy for SMEs to operate, because without making ease of doing business at the grassroots level possible, then it means you're not going to collect any taxes. So governments should lead from the front, both county and national government, in terms of coming up with an ease of doing business. They come up with a one-stop window whereby you can only pay one business permit that is incorporating everything, so that to avoid businesses coming up with all these matter of levies being levied on them, and they're discouraging these
and also
SMEs.
creating a loophole for unscrupulous officers within the value chain to harass MSMEs. That's one of the issues that has been raised by MSMEs, especially at the county level. Now, we've talked about investor flight. Given that the elections are around the corner, this happens every election cycle. So are we experiencing it?
It's already happening.
It's already happening.
We've seen, a mass exodus of especially foreign investors from the Nairobi Securities Exchange, regardless of the Q1 results, especially banking results, which are so good.
Yes.
We didn't see a lot of activity in the Nairobi Securities Exchange as expected. We've seen a lot of flight to safety, whatever you call flight to safety. Investors, especially foreign investors, fearing of the eventualities of the August poll.
Yes.
So they tend to run away and they cash out so that they can be able to wait for the elections to be completed, and then they can come back. It's a normal phenomenon. However, markets are forward-looking. Whereas they're making a flight to safety from the NSC, however small that might be or large that might be, they are going somewhere else.
And where are they running to?
Now, we usually say markets are forward-looking. So investors, we've seen it even with the crisis we have in Ukraine, investors tend to liquidate. Even in the US, they tend to liquidate their fixed income assets. We're talking about government bonds, especially in the US, and the money market funds. And they're getting into more more speculative. Sometimes they're getting into crypto, others are getting into precious metals, which are gold, others are getting into money markets. Locally, money markets have really been doing well, especially the public markets. Government has been giving auctions, especially on this government securities, treasury bills and bonds. The coupons or the interest rates have been very attractive. We've seen there's really been an oversubscription, especially to the longer government papers. Those are government bonds and bills which are more than at least 364-day papers. For that is the one-year treasury bills, and the result, it's as a result of the attractive coupons government has been able to give on these bonds, and also the foresightedness of investors that they want to get somewhere where they can be able to go long. At the same time, they get a very attractive return as they live through the period
secure investments.
Of elections. Exactly.
Secure investments.
But we've also seen a lot of innovation around collective investment schemes. We've seen new players coming on board, Adam Capital being one of them, through the Adam products being powered by the Adam Asset Managers Limited. So we've seen Kenyans, especially locals, moving a lot into the money market funds, balance fund and equity funds because of the main reasons of these funds are regulated and they are largely giving returns which are above the market average. And some of these products are very innovative, with links to M-Pesa, links to MasterCard and Visa card, many benefits coming on board.
Fintech, they are helping move things around.
Exactly.
Now, as we come to a close, I would want to give you like 45 seconds, so to speak. Ahead of the budget, we've been asking Kenyans about their expectations and what they would want to see. Give us your parting shot in as far as what we need to prioritize in the next financial year, 2022-2023. Mr. Obaga.
Whereas this budget statement is going to be centered around how to enhance economic recovery, at the same time promote livelihoods, we are likely to see government looking more into the big four agenda. They're likely to be a generous allocation. But in terms of recommendation, we do recommend government to consider debt restructures and also move into more concessional loans as opposed to commercial loans. Number two, government should focus more in terms of increasing its tax bracket, try to cast its nets wider in terms of collecting tax revenues, target the informal sector by coming up with structures, and lastly, to consider PPPs in order to make it easier for them to come up with infrastructure projects and other development activities in the economy.
Indeed. Very well said. We're not going to belabor that point. We want to tell you that we are keeping tabs on what is happening from various parts of the country, including Mombasa and Kisumu. As you know, all eyes are focused on Parliament this afternoon, where Ukur Yatani, that is the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, is going to be presenting the proposed budget that is going to inform government spending. I'm Regina Manyara, and we have been speaking to CEO of Adam Capital there, that is African Diaspora Asset Managers, none other than Michael Obaga. Enjoy your viewing. I leave you in the able hands of my colleague Betty Kiptum to take you through the conversation about the economy and the budget that we are expecting this afternoon. Dubbed President Uhuru Kenyatta's final budget. From Treasury to the streets and Parliament. What is contained in Ukur Yatani's briefcase? We unpack the numbers and analyze the statistics to help you understand what is contained in the 2022-2023 budget on KBC Channel 1.
Vitimbi Jumatatu hii. Jumuika nasi siku ya Jumatatu ili upate uhondo kamili kwenye vitimbi. Hiyo basi usikose burudani tosha kila